Just as everybody drew it up, Shedeur Sanders is a Cleveland Brown. We react to it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. In a wild turn of events, the Cleveland Browns get aggressive on day three, trade up in the fifth round, and select Shedeur Sanders to cap off a stunning and wild draft weekend here in Berea. Who is the odd man out in the quarterback room? And another bold draft strategy from this weekend that may just spell the end to Nick Chubb's time in Cleveland. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and of course at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And I want to let you know this today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn Jobs or LinkedIn.com/Locked On NFL. Terms and conditions may apply. And yes, after 2.5 days of talk nationally over Shedeur Sanders and why he was sliding and why he wasn't a first round pick, why he wasn't a second round pick, why he was now a fifth round pick. The Cleveland Browns end up being the team that pulls the trigger. After months and months of speculation, they were linked to the Browns originally, way back when, during the pre draft process. It turned out that they do land him, just not the way the conventional way everybody thought. That he wasn't a first round pick, he wasn't a day two pick, he wasn't even an early day three pick. He goes in the fifth round, and the Browns, like I said, got aggressive to get him, packaging their last two picks in this draft, numbers 166 and 192, which were fifth rounder and a sixth rounder, to move up to 144 with the Seahawks and take Shedeur Sanders. He comes off the board, and the Browns have a fourth quarterback to throw into the ring here for this competition that they're going to hold in the coming months and weeks. And there's a lot to dissect here, which we will get into the quarterback conversation and competition as well. But I just want to start on the surface with this move specifically and why Shedeur Sanders was the pick. I have some audio for you as well from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski as to why the pick made sense for them. And I do listen. We all knew at some point the value was going to be there. Like, say, I understand there's plenty of controversy over Shedeur the person, Shedeur the player, why he fell. Those were conversations being had at a national level throughout this draft on ESPN, on the NFL Network, all the networks that were carrying the draft. They were all having this conversation. But one thing that there was a consensus on from all the experts, and listen, I understand not all the experts on these TV shows aren't working in buildings right now, but somebody like Daniel Jeremiah, for example, who was used to work in an NFL front office, he has a great pulse on why these things happen. He has a great pulse on how NFL teams operate when they go through scouting players. And he made it clear at the end of night two last night that even he was perplexed why Shedeur Sanders was still on the board, that the talent was there. He wasn't a first round talent. Everybody at this point, everybody understood that. Everybody can wrap their head around that. I was there by the time the draft obviously got a little closer. I understood he wasn't going to be the pick at two because he wasn't that type of player. I can understand all those things, but for him to be available in the fifth round was stunning because he was projected as like a second or third round pick for many of these teams. And so there was more that meets the eye here. There was a lot to dissect here. There was obviously um, the meetings, from what I understand, didn't go well with a lot of these teams, and the rumors, I guess, spread throughout the league that like there was a number of teams he met with that he didn't really impress all that well, and because of that, it left a sour taste. There's always a reason why somebody falls, and Shedeur's is maybe one of the most complex and interesting and unclear because again, the talent was there for him to go earlier than he did, but it was just a matter of, the person and the player and how those interactions went and how teams kind of viewed him coming out of those things and how he handled certain things that they maybe threw at him in these meetings. And so I have to think it's a combination of that. And of course, who his dad is. Like the Dion part of this was clearly a factor. And I did think for the Browns, like when they took Dylan Gabriel at the end of day 2 with pick 94, I kind of was reserved to the idea of like, okay, they're done with quarterbacks. And and hearing Barry speak about Shedeur last night and the idea that like they thought he was a talented player, it's just about fit. To me, that sort of said, okay, they may be in the name of trading back the way they did in round 1 to get number 5 pick and an extra pick next year to position themselves to potentially move up to get a franchise quarterback out of a class next year that's supposed to be better. Maybe they didn't want to have somebody like Shedeur in this building that comes with a lot of extra stuff on the side, a lot of sort of an extra a sideshow, if you will, with everything that he comes with the dad with his dad being part of that equation and whatnot. Maybe they because if that player a year from now isn't part of the equation in terms of actually being a starting quarterback for you, and you have somebody that you're bringing as the franchise guy, and then he's kind of reserved to a backup role. Like if he wasn't going to be in the picture, I can understand where the Browns are like, we don't want to deal with all that extra stuff. Let's just get a guy who can be maybe a solid backup for us. Even though I thought the pick for Gabriel was too early, I can understand the thinking there. And so I was stunned that they actually pulled the trigger on trading up to get him. Andrew Berry explained the decision why. And for him, as he lays out in this clip I'll play for you, he says that it's about value and that they use their board to sort of dictate these things. And at this point in the draft, the value was there for Shedeur.
Shedeur, we talk oftentimes about quarterback being the most important position in the sport. We obviously spent a lot of time with Shedeur throughout the process. He's highly accurate, can play well from the pocket, very productive college career. And, we felt like it wasn't necessarily the plan going into the weekend to select 2 quarterbacks. But, as we talk about, we do believe in best player available. We do believe in positional value. And, we didn't necessarily expect him to be available in the 5th round. And so we love adding competition to every position room and adding him to compete with, the guys that are already in there. We felt like, that was the appropriate thing for us. We live by our board. We felt like he was a good, solid prospect at the most important position. We felt like it got to a point where he was probably mispriced, relative to the draft. Really the acquisition cost was pretty light, and it's a guy that we think can outproduce his draft slot. So I wouldn't say it's any more than that. Mary Kay, I think obviously Shedeur has kind of grown up in the spotlight, but our expectation is for him to come in here and work and compete. Nothing's been promised. Nothing will be given.
One thing that's undeniable, and Andrew Berry said it there, is the idea that at that point, Shedeur Sanders was very much worth the price of the pick. Like, say if you don't like Shedeur Sanders or you haven't liked him through this draft process, maybe you didn't want him for the Browns. The one thing that is undeniable is that in the 5th round, that is a steal. That is a steal of a pick. And so I don't the most perplexing thing that this team did this weekend was end their draft by drafting 2 quarterbacks. And that's something that we're gonna have to sort of reconcile with, something that we do need to talk about a little bit more at length in terms of reflecting on this draft, what the thought process was there. Barry, mentioned later on in the press conference that he came into today understanding, like he showed up to the building today understanding, like, yeah, if he keeps falling, we will make a move up. Like they were already sort of talking about this as a possibility. So it sounds like it was on their radar. I had been sort of under the impression that they did like Shedeur to an extent, but the value had to be right. And clearly, if he's falling into the 5th round, the value was very much right. So say what you want about how this draft shook out. Say what you want about them taking 2 quarterbacks. And in my opinion, reaching on somebody like Dylan Gabriel, and I still stand by that. I know there's been some people in the comments of my last episode saying they think Dylan Gabriel's great and whatnot. They didn't mind the pick, fine. We're all entitled to our opinions. I thought it was a reach, and I would have preferred Shedeur over Dylan Gabriel. As it turns out, you get both. A bit of an abnormal sort of outcome here to bring both those guys in, and it sets the stage for this quarterback competition between 4 different guys, 2 rookies, 2 veterans, and someone's going to be the odd man out, which is what we will try to decipher coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner who works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. As when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Use the hashtag hiring frame on your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helped them find the best high quality hires available. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may apply. Today's episode is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. No one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics, also easier. Responding to price changes, it's easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success with www.epicor or easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. So yes, after drafting Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel in the same draft, still sort of weird and crazy that the Browns drafted two quarterbacks, but here we are. It sets the stage for an interesting quarterback competition that features the likes of Joe Flacco, the savvy 41-year-old vet, who's back after the run in 2023, stealing the hearts of Cleveland fans everywhere. Kenny Pickett, once a hated rival, now in the quarterback room, making lots of conflicted feelings for fans who are trying to now cheer for the guy. And he has a legitimate chance, I think, to win this starting job when they open this thing up here in the coming weeks and months. And then two rookies, Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, the shorter stature guy who has some of the best numbers in college football history, second all time in total passing yards as a quarterback, and just steady Eddie guy who's super accurate and was consistent throughout his college career. And similarly, Shedeur Sanders, who's more of the build you look for in a quarterback, but lacks some of the athleticism. Can decision making is very much an elite trait or an elite thing for him, something that the Browns value as well. And similar to Gabriel, as I said, somebody who was consistent, I think, in the way that he played generally, and has a chance to be a superstar, partially because of who he is and his name. If he can develop at the next level and become an even better player, that's your competition. And so, what's interesting about this now? I've been saying for a while, the Browns will carry four quarterbacks during the offseason. I actually just got in a back and forth with somebody on, I think it was the YouTube comment section. By the way, I am learning since taking over this podcast that the YouTube comment section can be a very, very it's a rabbit hole. Like you get sucked into it and you just keep responding to people and you can't do it for hours and hours. I try to just go in and out when I can. But somebody had commented after my last mock draft on Monday that there's no way the Browns are taking two quarterbacks because I had them taking, I think, Tyler Shuck and then or no, Jalen Milroe, I think it was, and then Curtis Rourke later, like in the 6th or 7th round or something. I had them taking Curtis Rourke, like their second to last pick. And somebody was arguing with me in the comments that there's no way they're going to use a pick like that on a rookie quarterback and then waste that player by not having them make the roster and lose the value of like a rookie contract for a guy who was drafted that late. And I said, to me, it represents more bites at the apple, more opportunities to see, hey, can we find a quarterback late? Can one of these guys hit and become something for us? So there are certainly, I thought it was a possibility. I didn't think it would happen this way. I also thought they'd have a lot more picks than what they had to end the draft sort of so abruptly with Friday night. You're drafting Dylan Gabriel. You have one more pick in Dylan Sampson, and then you take another quarterback and you're just done. It felt sort of weird, a weird way to end it all with all the picks they had to start the weekend. But this is where they ended up, and they did take two quarterbacks, and I felt like that was possible because this team was always going to go into the offseason and embark on this competition with four guys in that room because that's what they do. They always have four guys in the offseason. Andrew Berry prioritizes that, and then they dwindle it. They cut it down to three once the season gets closer and you hit roster cutdown day. That's how I envision this thing playing out. It's exactly how it will play out. But here's the curious question now. You used a fourth round or a third round pick on Dylan Gabriel. That pretty much makes it feel like he's kind of like it was a top 100 pick that you used. He feels like he's probably pretty safe to make this roster because of the nature of where he was taken. You don't want to draft and then quickly move on from a third round pick, especially at that position if you think they can become something. And then Shedeur being a fifth round pick, maybe a little less security with a fifth round pick. Obviously, fifth, sixth, and seventh round pick guys are guys who are sort of always going to be fighting for a roster spot. So, I'm not going to sit here and say like he's cemented into a spot. But again, it was a draft pick that you used. It was the last draft pick that you used in this draft. Are they really going to cut ties with Shedeur Sanders that quickly? And so that leads me back to like Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett territory, where I'm like, okay, which of these guys is the odd man out? Flacco feels like the guy that's supposed to sort of come in, knows the offense, keep this thing afloat, be the bridge option, whereas Kenny sort of feels like the reclamation project. And so all this to say, I don't know that this ends with one of the rookies getting cut. I think they will probably try to invest in these guys as much as they can. If Shedeur has a pretty good like camp and training camp, or he does decent, like it would be tough to expose him to the practice squad because I think somebody would scoop him up eventually. Although I don't know, maybe they wouldn't because nobody wanted him through this draft process anyway, and so maybe they wouldn't do that if the Browns tried to go about it that way and put him on the sneak him onto the practice squad. But I still think they would try to keep both these guys on the active roster behind whoever their starter was, or maybe the solution is trading a guy. And that feels like it's what's more likely. It feels like they'll audition all four of these guys, get to the end of training camp, and do the same thing they've done basically the last 2 years. Because 2 years ago, you remember they traded Josh Dobbs right before the roster cutdown day. And they got, I think it was, I don't think they got a third round pick. I think they got like a fourth or a fifth round pick for Josh Dobbs, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. So they got draft capital out of it. I could see him doing the same thing. And maybe that means Kenny Pickett is the odd man out. Maybe they're going to let him audition in the preseason. He's had really good preseasons in the past, and then try to trade him right before the season starts and get some sort of draft capital in return. Or maybe they would do that with one of the rookies, probably more likely Shedeur Sanders, and see if he, puts together some nice tape, does some nice things during that time of year in the summer months, and then can be flipped for something before the season actually begins. I'd be fascinated. I am fascinated, as I'm sure you are as well, to see how this competition sorts itself out. What I would tell you sitting here today, and this is just kind of my early projection. We don't know anything. They haven't even taken the field yet. My early feeling on it would be Flacco probably wins the job to start the year, so he's here. Again, I don't think you're going to move on from Dylan Gabriel after using a third round pick on him. That would be crazy, unless you're getting a third round pick in return, which I don't know if that's happening either. So it feels like it's going to end up being one of they audition Shedeur and turn him into something that they can flip for a draft pick that's maybe even higher than the draft pick that they used on him, or maybe the same. Or it's Kenny Pickett and he becomes the guy that like you can sell to somebody. Because let's face it, the same reason Kirk Cousins wanted to wait till after the draft and may have to wait a little longer to get a trade done is the same reason that the Browns could potentially get something for somebody like Kenny Pickett at the end of training camp. There's always injuries. Some team's always going to lose a quarterback or a backup quarterback for that matter during training camp, during the preseason. And so that opens the door for a team to get desperate, swing a trade, get somebody in there that can maybe be a starter for you temporarily or for the season. And so the Browns will have some options here. Ultimately, it's a good problem to have. I don't think we need to be like sounding the alarms of like, what are they doing? Who are they going to keep? All these different things. I think it's going to be okay. But yeah, like this opens the door for one of these guys to probably get traded at the end of training camp, which shouldn't surprise anybody because it's what Andrew Berry has tended to do that time of year. Jeffrey Champion in the comments, by the way, says Joe Flacco could lose to Kenny Pickett. I think everybody's too low on Kenny Pickett. That's actually another good point too. I could have this backwards. I'm assuming Joe Flacco because they brought him in here as kind of the veteran of the class and the guy that feels like the bridge. But Kenny could go out there and play really well, and then maybe he earns the job, and then maybe Flacco's the one you're shopping to somebody that needs a veteran backup or just like a steady presence at some point. And that wouldn't be far-fetched either. So I guess at this point, I would probably lean that one of Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco is winning that job. The two rookies have a better chance of being safe because they used picks on them. But if they're going to try to trade one, it might end up being Shedeur Sanders. But ultimately, I think like it would be one of the vets that probably gets shopped to reduce this quarterback room to 3, which is the process they always go through. Have 4 in the offseason and reduce it to 3 before the season starts. And I'm assuming the same thing's going to happen here this year. leading into the 2025 campaign. That is going to be a fascinating group to watch all off season and leading up to the season. During the season, if they keep it all, if they find a way to keep somebody like Shedeur around, I mean, he's a polarizing player even for a 5th round pick. And so I mean, it's going to be all eyes on that competition for obvious reasons, and get ready for some fireworks because, man, it's going to be constant debates during training camp of who had the best day and who's in front now, and between some polarizing players and some fan favorite players, and even some that used to be hated by the fans as well. Another wild draft strategy from the Browns this weekend, included taking 2 running backs in this draft. It was the first time it happened in quite some time, and it may just spell the end of the Nick Chubb era. I hate to break it to you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place a $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes it super easy to bet, whether it's picking my favorite team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who blew out the Miami Heat today, 3-0 in that series. Let's keep it going. Let's keep winning me some money. Or if I want to dive into player props as well throughout the postseason for the Cavs or any of the teams that are involved in this wonderful postseason tournament this time of year. I also love that FanDuel has options that allow you to, as the game tips off, combine your live prop bets into same game parlays, which then allows you to win even more money while these games unfold. There's no better way to follow along with the NBA postseason, the playoffs, and eventually the NBA finals with FanDuel. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Good luck. All right, final segment here on the Locked On Browns podcast. Appreciate those of you jumping in with me live, and appreciate those who've been following along all weekend long. And on top of taking 2 quarterbacks this weekend, the Browns also took 2 running backs, which was a pretty interesting strategy in its own right. And it was the first time that a team had taken 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds, or through the first 4 rounds of an NFL draft since 2013. The 2013 Green Bay Packers were the last team to do that. And so it's a rare thing to even see to begin with. But it ends with the Browns now rebuilding their running back room, which I'm thrilled about. I'm ecstatic about. And they got 2 really good players out of it as well because, I liked Dylan Sampson for where they got him as a 4th rounder. I mean, value was perfect there. And then obviously Quinshon Judkins, anybody who's listened to this consistently knows I've been the biggest pounding the table for Quinshon Judkins, pounder of the table, which sounds a little inappropriate, for Quinshon Judkins this entire pre-draft process. Love the way he plays, his physical running style. Reminds me of Kareem Hunt. Also, I'll keep saying that over and over and over again. And I think Sampson adds like a nice little flair to this room as well. And those 2 now create this almost Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt like backfield that we used to see from the Browns, that they used to deploy with those 2 guys to sort of spell each other and keep each other fresh and take less hits and all these different things. And Quinshon actually, literally, as the Shedeur Sanders pick was happening, Quinshon, Harold Fannin Jr., and Carson, I knew I was going to do this. I knew I was going to completely botch his last name, but they were all doing their press conference for me with the media for the first time, and basically they were sort of cut off, and there was less attention being paid to them because the Shedeur Sanders thing was going down. But as it was happening, I know Quinshon specifically, Carson Schwessinger, by the way, I knew I was going to forget it. He was asked about like having this kind of two-headed monster in the backfield with Dylan Sampson. He says excited about it and whatever it takes for the team to win, which you would expect from a guy who played at Ohio State and split a backfield with TreVeyon Henderson, and they were unstoppable. So it's kind of a cool dynamic that's being created here. But I think on the back end of this, it to me, this signals that the Nick Chubb era may in fact be over. I've tried to stay optimistic about this. I have felt like many that the longer he was available in free agency, the more likely it was that they end up signing him at some point and he just comes back to Cleveland. With these moves this weekend, and adding 2 running backs to this backfield and sort of starting fresh, this changing of the guard, if you will, it does feel like that door is almost completely closed. Now, Andrew Berry, he never likes to close doors, so he did keep it open in regards to Chubb, but these were his comments afterwards that I think were pretty telling about how they view this running back room right now and Nick Chubb's place or lack thereof in it.
I'd say, not necessarily, but, the complexion of our running back room has changed this weekend. And so as we, work through the, undrafted free agency process, maybe take a breath on Sunday, we'll reassess kind of where the roster is and what opportunities are available to us, on the veteran market, and then we'll operate from there.
The admission that the complexion of the running back room had changed, I think, was pretty telling. Like the idea that they're looking at this as, okay, now our running back room is pretty stacked and set right now. There might not be room for a Nick Chubb in this backfield anymore. And this is a tough pill, I think, for fans to swallow. I get it. I think Andrew Berry, throughout this entire draft process, had tried to let fans down somewhat easy with that. It's going back to the combine where he was asked about meeting with Nick Chubb's representation and saying and saying flat out they were going to let him test free agency. We always knew it was a possibility from that point on, but and then rumors that he might sign other places and whatnot. But I know deep down this fan base, and even as somebody who covers the team, Nick Chubb means so much to the city and this team that like you wanted to see him back. But it's been like the way that everybody's talked about Nick Chubb, even like Catherine Hickman, the assistant GM, she was talking to us on night 2 of the draft about some of the picks that they made. And it's like every time Nick Chubb's name comes up, it's like they're eulogizing his career in Cleveland. It's like it's hard to compare to Nick Chubb. He's so special and he means so much to the city. They don't use the past tense, so it does kind of feel like, they're trying to, you choose their words wisely. It's not like they said he was, but they almost like just try to sum up his career into these how iconic he is and how much he means to the fan base and all this different stuff. And so I find it kind of interesting the way he's being talked about because it does almost feel like, again, they're letting you down easy. Like, we love Nick Chubb. Nothing bad to say about him. He's great. He's been so special. The fan base loves him. The team loves him. He's irreplaceable. And then once he goes and signs somewhere else, it's this realization that, like, okay, they meant all those things, but that is now a closed door and an era that ends here in Cleveland for Nick Chubb. It's unfortunate from a number of standpoints because I do think it ending the way it did with the injuries kind of being the thing that derailed it is something that's a tough pill to swallow because Nick Chubb at the peak of his powers was the best, if not one of the best, if not the best running back in football. He was brilliant. He's the third highest rusher in franchise history. He's such a special talent, and you hate to see it maybe cut short because of nagging injuries, and especially the knee injury that it was even remarkable he came back from. I hope it's not the end for a lot of different reasons. I know you probably don't hope it's the end for a lot of different reasons because Nick Chubb is a fan favorite here. But the reality is, after like leaving this weekend, I feel like that door is probably closed because they've recreated this backfield now with 2 young guys that they feel really excited about, and almost sort of replicated what used to be with Chubb and Hunt, where they have these 2 backs that can kind of bounce off each other and spell each other and share reps, and it could sort of blaze this new path for that group, especially as you go back to Stefanski's offense, which the run game is super important in. So I do think that's where we have acceptance is the first step towards healing, and I think that's where we're at with the Nick Chubb conversation. Last thing, because I'm going to do a much deeper reflection on this draft as a whole coming up Monday. That's my plan. But I am trying to sort of encapsulate like how I feel about this draft as a whole, because I do think the grand scheme of things, this is a pretty solid draft. Starting with, I understand the shock value of trading back and not ending up with Travis Hunter after we had all talked ourselves into him, but ending up with Mason Graham at 5, great pick. Top 5 player, made sense value-wise, and you get a first round next year. I thought that was a good pick. Carson Schwessinger, I thought was another good pick for where he was taken. Maybe a little early for my liking, but and going defense back to back was kind of surprising, but I did like it. Then you follow it up with Quinshon Judkins, my favorite pick in this class by far. Harold Fannin Jr., guy I love, local kid, trying to replenish that tight end room. Kevin Stefanski loves running 2 tight end sets. He's going to be involved in this stuff almost immediately. And so I like that pick a ton as well. And then that gives us that paves the way for Dylan Gabriel, which is the most head scratching pick of this entire draft class. Dylan Sampson, though, the running back out of Tennessee, again, value solid, putting together this backfield that consists of kind of two different guys, a two-headed monster. I love that idea for this team. And then you end it with Shedeur Sanders, who I've been so adamant I wanted to see come to Cleveland, and I thought was a great fit for Kevin Stefanski's offense. And to get him in the 5th round is a steal. The only pick I really am sitting here perplexed by and trying to sort of process and figure out is Dylan Gabriel. And I think a lot of people feel that way. It is weird they come away with 2 quarterbacks. I expected them to come away with 1 and maybe 2 if they had kept all their draft picks that they had, in like the 6th round or something, just taking a flyer. For them to come away with 2 quarterbacks and not once address offensive tackle or wide receiver was kind of surprising. But there have been Browns personnel telling us this weekend that they like the guys they have in the line, the offensive line groups. And so maybe they feel like that group's going to be stronger than some of us are giving it credit. I know it's an aging group, so there's some concerns there. But this is the gist of the team right now. And I did ask Andrew Berry, by the way, about like pursuing wide receivers. He said the entire roster is a work in progress. He gave me a very non-answer, as expected. But they have some refining to do in some spots. And I do think, as I talked about a couple weeks ago, wide receiver is still a major need here. Don't be surprised if Elijah Moore's back in the Cleveland Browns uniform. Boom. I'll leave you with that little bomb there to get us out of here. But I do want to thank you for tuning in to this episode as we recap draft weekend here in Berea. The Cleveland Browns coming away with 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, a new interior defensive pass rusher, a new linebacker, and a new tight end that should thrive in Kevin Stefanski's offense. It was a lot of fun covering this weekend with you. I'll have plenty to discuss and dissect about the makeup of this roster, the picks. I'm working on some guests. I'm hoping to get some different position coaches for some of these guys and pick their brains about the players that the Browns are adding. So you don't want to miss that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, Locked On Browns, if you haven't done so already, to make us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, be sure to check out our Locked On NFL Draft Show from the entire weekend. You can see our little clips and shorts and all kinds of different stuff from throughout this weekend and different picks that were made and different opinions and thoughts on things that went down. You can also keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs with my good buddy Danny Cunningham. Locked On Guardians as well. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.